Hey, Lark and Rose here. Every once in a while, somebody points out to me some article or some news story in the mainstream media that talks about anarchism and almost always misrepresents what it is. And so there's this article in Teen Vogue called Anarchy, What It Is and Why Pop Culture Loves It, which I immediately assumed, without having read it, was going to be stupid leftist garbage. But then I read it, and it was stupid leftist garbage. And so I'm going to do this video pointing out all the things it lies about and pointing out the agenda that I think is behind stories like this, because I don't think that this is by accident. And the person who wrote it may just be expressing what they think, but the fact that this is what shows up in the mainstream whenever the word anarchy is used is not by accident. So here we go. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm going to read the bits and pieces that actually matter and try to get to the philosophy. So, Anarchy, What It Is and Why Pop Culture Loves It. This is by Kim Kelly. The thing says, writer Kim Kelly is an anarchist based in New York City and an organizer with the Metropolitan Anarchist Coordinating Council, which is sort of a strange term. Sounds slightly Chairman Mao-ish, but whatever. I assume Kim is a female name, but that might not be the case. I'm just going to assume that unless I find out otherwise. So, first line is, it's a complicated philosophy that's more than just a punk rock phase. It's not a punk rock phase, and it's not a complicated philosophy. It literally means rule by no one. Anarchy, just like monarchy means rule by one person, anarchy means rule by nobody. No rulers. Rule by no one. It's a simple word, it's a simple concept. It's not complicated. However, what happens, and what you will see in this article, is that certain people like to just tack on a bunch of preferences they have, usually socialist, communist BS, and declare that that's what anarchism is. And you'll see them doing exactly that in a minute. And it's this weird habit they have of trying to grab a monopoly on the term of only we're allowed to use the term. And now it doesn't just mean no rulers, it means no hierarchy and no currency and no property, and you're not allowed to wear hats on Tuesday, and you're not allowed to eat pork products. I made up the last two, but it's that stupid. You don't just get to take your random collection of preferences, stick them onto an actual concept, and declare that that's what the concept means. Anarchy means rule by no one. Anarchism means advocating a society that doesn't have a ruling class. Period. End of sentence, end of paragraph, end of book, the end. That's what it means. And there are people trying to say, well, no, historically and traditionally it's referred to blah, blah, blah. Historically and traditionally it comes from the Greek, it means rule by no one, the end. And yes, in the past, there were a bunch of friggin' commies who tried to hijack the term and pretend that only they are true anarchists when they're not even true anarchists. But we're going to get into that as we see what this article does, because this article very predictably does the leftist routine thing. In a pop cultural sense, at least, the idea of anarchy has been characterized by either a middle fingers up, no parents, no rules punk attitude, or a panicky, more conservative outlook used by national and state sources to represent violent chaos and disorder. Slightly awkward sentence, but okay, close enough. In other words, the authoritarians try to use the word anarchy to mean chaos and mayhem. Today, we can see an extremely serious, radical, leftist political philosophy on t-shirts at Hot Topic. It's not inherently leftist. In fact, we'll get into why it isn't leftist at all. So what is anarchism? What do those people raising black flags and circling A's really want? Here's what you need to know. What that really means is, here's what the mainstream media wants you to think. Never mind what's actually happening. Never mind the ideas that are actually spreading versus the anarcho-commie bullshit that's just stagnating because most people, as soon as they understand what it means, realize, ew, that's just dumb and childish and a bad idea. But the media wants people associating that with the term anarchism, just like they want Antifa, a bunch of whiny brats breaking people's windows for no apparent reason because they're mad about something or other. They want that to be the image of anarchism in most people's minds. So this goes along, ironically, it exactly goes along with the agenda of the ruling class to make people think anarchism means whiny socialists. So, what is anarchism? Anarchism is a radical, revolutionary, leftist political philosophy, no, that advocates for the abolition of government. Close enough. Hierarchy, as in abolition of hierarchy, nope, dead wrong. And all other unequal systems of power. Nope, dead wrong, completely made up. You just pulled that out of your butt. Hierarchy, voluntary hierarchy, is all over the place, and if you try to have society without it, it becomes a gigantic mess. Feel free to try. I won't forcibly stop you, but it doesn't freaking work. Anarchy doesn't mean you can't have football teams, because football teams are a hierarchy. There's a captain that decides what the plays are. None of that. To be a real anarchist, you can't have football teams, or baseball, or somebody telling somebody else what to do on a job site, or anybody ever instructing anybody else on it. No, they're making up the complaint against hierarchy. It doesn't mean no hierarchy. It means no rulers. There's a difference. And you really have to be just a clueless, whiny, commie child to think that hierarchy is inherently bad and wrong. It's like, try to do anything. In fact, try to go to your Metropolitan Anarchist Coordinating Council and have anybody there say anything they want at any time. Like, you don't have to be on the council. You can wander in. If I walked in and said, I'm going to give a 3-hour speech here, they're going to demonstrate hierarchy, because they're going to say, no, this is our club, or this is our meeting, here's what we do. Oh, that's called a hierarchy, you hypocritical doofus, and you can't have society without hierarchies. Voluntary hierarchies, which are all over the place, are perfectly useful. They're downright necessary. So when they suddenly make up that anarchy means no ruling class and no hierarchies and no other unequal systems of power, by that they don't mean ruling classes, because they already said no government. They mean anything they think is sort of vaguely unfair by whatever arbitrary definition of that they mean. And a lot of the times they mean inequality of outcome, especially financially. Well, you have more money than me, so that counts as you oppressing me somehow. No, it freaking doesn't. And anarchy doesn't mean everybody's going to have the same amount of stuff. That's stupid. That's made up. And that goal is idiotic and inherently immoral, because the only way to get there is by way of violence, which is what communists actually advocate. But we'll get to that. So, immediately gets wrong what anarchism is. It seeks to replace what its proponents view as inherently oppressive institutions, like a capitalist society. Totally, absolutely wrong. Now, most commies are mushy as hell in their head about what the term capitalism means. If they're just complaining about the corporate, fascist, crony authoritarianism that violently steals resources, I'm against that too. That's not what anybody who's for capitalism is for. It's not what anarcho-capitalists want, obviously. So a lot of the things they complain about and call capitalism, I complain about too, and just say that's not what capitalism means. But talking about it being oppressive to have a capitalist society, they are literally saying if somebody offers them a job, like, hey, I'll pay you this much if you do this job, you're oppressing me. And if you think that's an exaggeration, go read how these anarcho-commies talk. They think they're entitled to the means of production. If somebody who has a little business offers them, hey, I'll pay you to do this, they think they're entitled to all his stuff, to just steal his business and take it over, and then collectively cooperate and share it, steal it, and then get all the profits from it, and heck with him, because they're just entitlement mentality thieves. So, yeah, a capitalist society, if you know what the word actually means, literally means a society in which people can trade voluntarily without government coercion. So no, that is not oppressive. Duh. They complain about the prison industrial complex. Good, so do I. And so it's saying that anarchists seeks to replace all that with non-hierarchical, wrong, horizontal structures, wrong, powered by voluntary associations between people. Yay, you got something right. However, the thing you got right contradicts almost everything else you said. Because voluntary association results in inequality of outcome and inequality of wealth. because people trade and they work different amounts and they end up getting different amounts of stuff. And according to communists, no, we all collectively own everything. You're not allowed to have more than me. Now you're oppressing me. So they are very much anti-voluntary association and voluntary trade. Because when the result of voluntary trade is inequality, which it's always going to be for one way or to one degree or another, therefore violent confiscation. So, but the horizontal structures is another thing they just make up. That's not what anarchism means. And by horizontal structures, they mean, like, picture a company and, like, we all have an equal say and an equal ownership and we all get together and have these blah, blah, blah. And there have been people who tried that. Every once in a while, a business can just barely work a little bit when they do that. And in the vast majority of cases, it doesn't freaking work. It works way better when you have somebody who actually knows how the whole thing works, and then people under them who know how pieces of it work, and then people under them who have their little, segmented part of the job, and they do their part of the job. Imagine a horizontally organized car manufacturer where everybody there, all right, we have 10,000 employees, they all have an equal say on what the car is going to look like. How well do you think that's going to work? No, the engineers decide what the car is going to look like. You just put it together. And if you do it any other way, it's not going to freaking work. But the important thing here is that they're pretending horizontalism is like essential to anarchism, or that that's what anarchism means. No, it freaking isn't. So, anarchists organ around a key set of principles, including horizontalism. No. Mutual aid. Well, yeah, you can do that. Autonomy of what? I'm not sure what she means by autonomy. Like, everybody being self-sufficient, because it doesn't mean that, or just everybody owns themselves and runs their own life, which it does mean, but totally conflicts with communism. So I'm not even sure what she means by that. And I would bet money she's not sure what she means by that either, because communists rarely do. Solidarity, a good, happy, feel-good term that doesn't mean anything. Like, solidarity between who? Like, the guy running the business, you're not really including his solidarity if you're saying, let's go steal his shit. He's your victim. Direct action, which usually means like vandalism and stuff. And direct democracy. Democracy is inherently political. It's about government. It is about electing. It is about people voting for controls to be imposed on other people. So no, direct democracy, which the perfect example of direct democracy is gang rape, as I and many other people often point out. Is that anarchism? No. Is that good? No. Is that voluntary? No. And direct democracy, a form of democracy in which the people make decisions themselves via consensus. Wrong on both counts. That's not what it means. Consensus and democracy are mutually exclusive. Consensus means everybody agrees. And if everybody agrees, fine, that's voluntary. That's voluntarism. If there's 4 people in a room saying, what should we have for, what should we order for food today for lunch? And everybody says, pizza? Pizza? Yeah, pizza. Good. We got pizza. That's consensus. That is not democracy. Democracy is 3 people say pizza, 1 guy says Chinese, and the 3 say, you have to pay for pizza. And you have to eat it too, because the people have spoken, and now you're an enemy of the people, and you're a counter-revolutionary, and we will crush you. So democracy and consensus are not at all compatible. And so it says, where people make decisions themselves via consensus, as opposed to representative democracy, of which the United States government is an example. Which, no, it isn't, but I won't even get into that. But yeah, people directly voting to force the will of the majority on the minority is not anarchism, and it's not voluntary, and it's not moral. So you totally lose. 3 strikes, you're out. Quote, I would define anarchism as the non-hierarchical, non-electoral, direct action-oriented form of revolutionary socialism, end quote. Mark Bray, a lecturer at Dartmouth College and author of Antifa, the Anti-Fascist Handbook, tells Teen Vogue. I would define anarchism to mean a big purple giraffe making tuna noodle casserole and juggling armadillos. You don't get to just randomly make shit up and pretend that's what a word means when it's already existed for a really long time and actually means rule by no one. That's what it means. Don't make up random unrelated shit and pretend that's what it is and say, I would define it as something that has nothing to do with what it means. No, revolutionary socialism, A, is stupid, and B, is not anarchism. And the thing is, this is what the mainstream media and the ruling class want people to associate with anarchism. Because revolutionary socialism is what Mao did. It's what Stalin and Lenin did. It's what you have in North Korea. It's what's failed horribly and resulted in mass violence, and nobody wants that. So what the current ruling class wants is for people to associate the term anarchism with this stupid crap. Revolutionary socialism, when it means nothing of the sort. And the fact that it's been a long time that some people have been pretending it means this doesn't mean it means that. Anarchy, it's from the Greek. You don't get to go back and change what Greek means. It means rule by no one. So this lecturer at Dartmouth is an idiot. Oh, and he also wrote Antifa, the Anti-Fascist Handbook, which I haven't read that, so I don't want to totally judge it, but he's probably in favor of them and ignores the fact that Antifa is totally fascist. They're absolutely violent control freak idiots complaining about their mirror image in other fascists, and they're too dumb to know. As the New York City-based anarchist group Metropolitan Anarchist Coordinating Council, of which I'm a member, writes on its website, quote, we demonstrate a vision for a society in fundamental opposition to the brutal logic. In opposition to the brutal logic of contemporary capitalism. We don't have capitalism. We have halfway to socialism and halfway to fascism, and they're calling that capitalism, whatever. So they advocate a society based on mutual aid, cooperation, and radical democracy, which is not anarchism and is not moral and is not voluntary. Way to go, you lose. Where did anarchism come from is the next question. That's a stupid question. Well, it could be a smart question if your answer is it came from no rulers and people advocating no rulers, the end. That's where it came from. But what they do, as I said before, is the commies like to pretend, well, traditionally, whiny entitlement-mentality commies call themselves anarchists, so they get to decide what the term means. And it only means all this not hierarchy and all this random shit that they piled on top of it because they wanted it to mean that when it doesn't. Anarchism has ancient roots, with the word itself stemming from the ancient Greek anarchos, or without rulers. Yay, you got it right. And then immediately ruin it. But it fully bloomed as a political philosophy. No. It means rule by no one. It doesn't need to fully bloom into anything. There can be other ideas, there can be other philosophies, communism, socialism, other stupid collectivist shit, that means other stuff. Anarchism means what it means. It's a very limited, very simple, very basic concept. But they're pretending it fully bloomed as a political philosophy in Europe and the US during the 19th century. At the time, communist thinker Karl Marx's writings, had become popular and people were searching for alternatives to the capitalist system. The Paris Commune, a brief period in 1871 when Paris was controlled by anarchists and communists. Controlled by communists. So, anarchists were politically controlling. Get a dictionary. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. There isn't such thing as a political system controlled by anarchists. Inspired more young radicals to take up the cause, sometimes to violent effect, when they embraced the philosophy of propaganda by the deed. Don't know what that refers to, don't really care. By the early 20th century, anarchism had spread throughout the world, but government repression often made it difficult for anarchists to organize and achieve their goals. Not surprising. Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, I still don't know how to pronounce that, is generally recognized as the first self-proclaimed anarchist. And his theories continue to influence whiny commies today. Anarchist thought today. If you've ever heard the phrase, property is theft, that's straight from Proudhon's 1840 book, What is Property? That, in a nutshell, sums up the stupidity and the not anarchist nature of communism. Property is theft. You make something with your time and effort, with raw materials nobody was using, nobody claimed. They think it's theft for you to have that. And they think them needing it and therefore stealing it from you isn't theft. And they think voting for a central committee to say, yeah, we're going to steal your stuff and give it to them isn't theft and isn't government. These people are just confused as hell. Now, Proudhon also said property is freedom. So he's like trying to be all wise, and mostly he's just being wishy-washy. And the thing is, a bunch of these, like Proudhon and Bakunin and Kropotkin, yeah, I always pronounce that wrong. They had legitimate criticisms of a bunch of the authoritarian structures, and then they come up with this mushy-headed crap of everybody just owns everything, and it's blah, 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 blah. So they're against things that you should be against, but then they pile on this stupid collectivist garbage that never works, can never even be defined. Like, good luck defining means of production in any objective way. And like, as I say, and I'm not kidding and not exaggerating, means of production refers to stuff that communists want to steal, and private property refers to stuff that communists want to steal. Personal property, which they're in favor of, refers to stuff that communists don't want you taking from them. That is the only difference in definition. There is nothing closely resembling an objective definition between the two, except shit they want to be able to steal from other people because they feel entitled, and their own shit they don't want other people to steal from them. That's literally the distinction. And if you ask them to clarify and draw the line and define the difference, you'll see it's just they're entitled to other people's stuff, but you're not entitled to mine. Just completely childish mentality that they try to pass off as a philosophy. So, all right, so she goes into the history of commie, supposed anarchists. Other famous contributors to anarchism's development include Kropotkin, Bakunin, Emma Goldman, and lists a bunch of names. Some of them I haven't heard of, some of them I have. In addition to these names, countless others. Oh, and they, I don't know about the ones I haven't heard of, but all the ones she listed were totally commies. And conspicuously left out Albert J. Nock and Lysander Spooner, and because she is trying to make you think that communism equals anarchism, or that anarcho-communism, that's what real anarchism is. In addition to these names, countless others whose identities have been lost to history have helped refine and spread the ideology of anarchism. Today, anarchism is a fully global, intersectional philosophy with particularly strong roots in Latin America, Spain, Germany, and as of 2012, the Middle East, blah, blah, blah. How does anarchism intersect with other political philosophies? Anarchism as a philosophy lends itself to many ideas. There is no one way to be an anarchist. Wow. Way to completely demolish your whole point in one sentence. That's actually true. To be an anarchist, there's one requirement. Don't advocate a ruling class. Anything else you do or think or advocate is irrelevant to whether you're an anarchist or not. You can be an anarchist who goes around chopping people up. That's not nice. You wouldn't be a voluntarist. But if you say, I don't want a ruling class, but I'm going to go kill my neighbors, you're an anarchist. If you say, I'm totally a pacifist and I don't hurt anybody, I don't even hurt animals, and I don't believe in a ruling class, you're an anarchist. All the other stuff is irrelevant and unrelated. So yes, there is no one way to be an anarchist, she says, after pretending you have to be an anti-hierarchy, anti-all these other things commie to be an anarchist. Classic anarchist traditions. Okay, here we go. Again, they're trying to say, we use this term for a long time, so it's ours. Classic anarchist traditions include mutualism, which is, all right, I'm not even sure it's worth going through all these subcategories of collectivist stupidity. Anarcho-communism, which favors community ownership of the means of production. Well, gee, how do you accomplish that? If there's some guy and he makes a little business and he makes a little factory. Look, I now know how to make widgets in my house. Well, we think the community should own the means of production. Really? How are you going to get it from that guy? Oh, violence by way of a central authoritarian committee deciding he has to hand it over. which makes you not an anarchist, and it makes it not voluntary anymore, which is why anarcho-communism is BS. And the abolition of the state and capitalism, which they put together. Anarcho-syndicalism, she goes through this different... And individualism. Okay, so she finally gets around to individualism, which has similarities with libertarianism and emphasizes individual freedom above all. More recent, more postmodern school of thought, including anarcho-feminism, anarcho-feminism, black anarchism, queer anarchism, green or eco-anarchism, and anarcho-pacifism have found firm footing in today's anarchist communities. Those aren't things. Those are unrelated. It's like saying, I'm an anarchist who eats lima beans on occasion. I'm an anarcho-lima beanist. It's unrelated. Black anarchism, that doesn't mean anything. Like, you're black and you're an anarchist and they have nothing to do with each other. What kind of ruling class do you not advocate if you're a black anarchist as opposed to if you're a queer anarchist? It's just made up bullshit terms that just confuse and muddy the waters, which the ruling class has to love because they don't want people actually understanding the very simple concept of let's not have a ruling class. So they love all these, subcategories of mushy bullshit. So finally, she gets around to this, which is hysterical. Anarcho-capitalism, which is interested in self-ownership and free markets, is much rarer and is considered by most anarchists to be illegitimate because of anarchism's inherent opposition to capitalism. Bullshit, bullshit, and bullshit. It is not much rarer. It has been growing by leaps and bounds in recent years so that now there are hundreds of thousands of anarcho-capitalists while the stupid commie mentality has been stagnating and they're still wallowing around and whining about the same crap that will never catch on to a majority of the population, because as soon as somebody actually understands what they're advocating, they realize that's just childish and stupid and can't work and never does. But it's interesting that this is a government approved message that it's much rarer. Like those people over there who want actual freedom and like you own the fruits of your labor and stuff, they're much rarer. Bald-faced lie. Now, she might just think that because while she's hanging out in her little committee with fellow commies, she doesn't hear the tens of thousands, the hundreds of thousands of actual voluntarist anarchists out there. She might just not be aware of it, but just pretend it's rarer. Like Anarchapulco, last time there was 1,500 people there. I don't know of any events where 1,500 anarcho-communists show up, which is probably because they can't have hierarchy, so they can't organize the goddamn thing. Sorry, but I digress. No, it's not much rarer, and it's considered by most anarchists to be illegitimate. This is utter BS. This is a bunch of whiny commies trying to grab a monopoly on the use of the term anarchism when it doesn't even apply to what they believe for reasons I already pointed out. They just desperately want to say, you're not really an anarchist because you accept like voluntary hierarchies and different kinds of trade and currency and people being able to do things in a bunch of different ways. No, you have to do it the communist way or you're not an anarchist. It has to be right within the specific centrally controlled master plan or it's not anarchism. No, that's the exact opposite of how anarchism works. It just means no ruling class. It doesn't mean you get to make up this giant, stupid economic model and force it on everybody. Oh, and then she says, anarchism's inherent opposition to capitalism, which is just stupid, and it's absolutely false. It isn't just her tagging something on the end of it and pretending that's what the word means, which would be bad enough. It's all the way 180 degrees in the wrong direction. Capitalism, what the word actually means, as anarcho-capitalists use it, which is trade not hindered by violence in the state, is absolutely essential to anarchism. You can't have anarchism without it because by definition, if it means trade without the state, if you don't have it, it means you have the state. Because that's all it means, is you're allowed to trade and there's not a government robbing you. To pretend that that isn't compatible with anarchism when it is anarchism. It's the same thing. It's the reason I don't call myself an anarcho-capitalist very often, because it's redundant. Like, I own me, and by the way, I own me. Like, because if I own me, I own the fruits of my labor. That's capitalism. And I get to trade it, and nobody else gets to take it from me without my consent. That's the heart and soul of capitalism. And to pretend that that's not compatible with anarchism is just stupid. What is the difference between anarchism and communism? Everything in the world, but I'm sure she's going to get that totally wrong. When most people think of communism, they inevitably think of the states that were formed in the 20th century based on various interpretations of Marxism and Leninism. So I'm not sure I even care what she pretends the distinction is. Quote, in orthodox Marxist theory, the state is an institution that is politically neutral and it can be used for different purposes depending on which class controls it. Therefore, the orthodox Marxist goal is to capture the state, turn it into a dictatorship of the proletariat, and suppress the capital class. Once they do that, the state will wither away and you'll have communism, which is what Marx predicted, and it's really frickin' stupid. We're going to have a giant authoritarian ruling class that decides who gets what, and then it's just going to wither away for no apparent frickin' reason. Because that always happens when you create a giant authoritarian ruling class. It just decides to go away for some reason. So stupid. Marxist theory is just idiotic. But then he says the anarchist argument is the state is not neutral. It's inherently hierarchical and inherently an institution of domination, and therefore they oppose the state, which is weird because they were just saying before that Marx is on their side. But they're basically saying, no, like, we don't want the state in between on the way there, but Marx thinks you need it on the way there. Which is funny because for everything he got wrong, Marx gets that right where the anarcho-commies don't, where he came right out and said, like, we need the capitalism and the free trade to create the wealth because communism sucks at that. Because if you don't personally benefit from your own effort, nobody's very productive. So we needed to create the wealth, and then we'll come in with the state and take over and steal it and redistribute it fairly. So Marx was more honest in the violence he condones, whereas the anarcho-commies are way more confused. Another important difference is that historically in Marxism, economics were the fundamental building block, Bray continues, whereas anarchists have historically formed a critique of domination and hierarchy that is broader and not as one-dimensional. In other words, they mush it into all sorts of things that they arbitrarily complain about, like currency and trade and ownership and hierarchies, including voluntary hierarchies. How does anti-fascism intersect with anarchism? Oh, I don't really care, except to point out that Antifa is totally fascist while complaining about their mirror image. How else has anarchism made an impact on pop culture? Oh, and they get into a bunch of, like, bands and artists who've used the term and used the thing, and I don't really care about that. That doesn't do anything. It has nothing to do with the actual philosophy. Anarchist symbols like the black flag and circle A are easily recognizable when scrawled on desks or spray painted on walls. I think that's how those are the two examples, like, two kinds of vandalism is the only way she can think of to express the idea. But they have also become ubiquitous in film and music, from SLC Punk to V for Vendetta to the punk rock slasher film Green Room, whatever, even hip-hop, yada yada. Again, she's talking about cultural stuff that I don't care about. Anarchism and anarchists are everywhere, and hopefully now you've got a better understanding of what they're fighting for and against. What she really means is, hopefully now you think that anarchist means communist, because we're really upset by how many people who actually understand self-ownership and non-aggression have taken over the label of anarchist by advocating something that's actually moral and rational and works, instead of the revolutionary socialist bullshit that just causes one disaster after another. Again, the reason a story like this can come out, and the reason it's in something like Teen Vogue, I have no idea what the distribution is of that, but I assume it's something significant. The reason you will see something like this, and you won't see something like that about voluntarism, even though it's bigger, or anarcho-capitalism, even though it's bigger and has a gigantic event, you probably still won't see anything, if the next Anarchapulco has 3,000 or 4,000 people at it, Media will still, no, let's pretend that's not happening. Let's pretend these whiny commies smashing some windows over here. That's what anarchism is, everybody. See how horrible it is? Don't look into anarchism. Don't look into it. Please don't look into it. That's why this sort of crap is allowed into the mainstream media, because all it does is make people think, oh, it's whiny, violent idiots. Well, that's not me, so I don't want anarchism. And that may not have been the goal of the writer. She probably just honestly believes in the mushy-headed crap that she's writing. I don't know, unless she's actually a government plant, but I'll just assume that she actually believes what she's writing. But she also knows damn well that it's the anarcho-capitalism is spreading all over the place, and she doesn't want that to be the case, so she wants there to be an article where they try to regain control of the label anarchism. And it's completely dishonest, and it's stupid for reasons I already explained. And you're going to see more and more of this. You've already seen it all over the places. You know, what's the saying? You know, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. Well, they ignored anarchism for a long time, and now they can't. It's all over the place. They have to mention it. They tried to laugh at it for a while. They can't even do that really anymore because it's all over the place. So now they have to fight it, and what they're doing mainly is trying to demonize it. Guilt by association and doing the straw man thing of mischaracterizing it. There was an article, I think it was a couple of years back, of a couple military guys who did some violent crime, and the article was like, these are anarchists. And then it quotes them saying, we have to get back to the Constitution. It's not anarchist, you idiot. But the media and the ruling class are eager to stick that label on anything violent, anything stupid, anything communistic, anything that most people will say, well, I don't want to look into that. That's dumb. Because they have to demonize it, because if people actually look into the concepts, you know, self-ownership and non-aggression and understand it, as more and more people are doing by the thousands and tens of thousands, they say, oh, this actually makes a lot of sense. Why don't we do things this way? So there's going to be more and more stuff like this where they're trying to demonize it. And they're not above doing some false flag thing and blaming it on an anarchist. They've already done it before. They're not above sending in cops undercover into demonstrations to break a bunch of stuff and go, anarchy, woo, which they've totally gotten caught doing before. And at the same time, they may have a bunch of useful idiots in Antifa, which are just whiny, violent children having tantrums that don't really know what the hell they believe and don't really understand much of anything. All they know is, we're mad at something. Let's break a window. Yeah, that'll show them. And so there are people stupid enough to, that's the extent of their understanding of anarchism. And that is what the ruling class wants everybody's extent of understanding of anarchism to be. That's why you get this mushy commie crap. And it's a desperate attempt to keep down the spread of actual, rational, moral voluntarism and real anarchism, where we actually don't want a ruling class. We want to voluntarily interact in a bunch of different ways. If you want to have your commune over there, fine. Don't try to force it on us. But with your property and your time and effort, arrange it however you want. That's the beauty of not having a ruling class. Don't come to us and say, everybody has to do this in a communal way, and we're anarchists. No, you're not. You're spoiled twits, and you're actually helping the ruling class by making people think those are the choices. To have what we have now, or to have whiny, violent brats. There's something else. It's called voluntarism. Look into it. Don't bother trying to look into it in the mainstream media, because it won't be there. Don't bother asking people in power what it is, because they won't tell you. But Google voluntarism, or non-aggression, or self-ownership, or go to my YouTube channel, or get my book, The Most Dangerous Superstition, and read it and go, oh yeah, that does make a lot of sense. And it won't be Marxist, and it won't talk you into being a whiny entitlement mentality commie. It'll show you that what most people already are, whether they understand it or not, is anarchists. And they've just been taught garbage that's interfering with that. They've been taught the political mythology that messes up their perceptions of reality and warps what they actually believe in. So I'm not that concerned about this sort of garbage. It's going to keep coming out, but it's not going to stop the spread of the understanding. It's not something you have to do direct action and direct democracy and go overthrow something and break a window. It's just people coming to the understanding that authority is a myth and that self-ownership is what is.